The container cleared customs at the port of Long Beach on a Tuesday afternoon. Manifest documentation listed automotive parts manufactured in Guangdong Province, destination Riverside Warehouse Distribution Center. Weight matched declared cargo. Paperwork aligned with import records. The container number corresponded to a legitimate shipping company with years of clean operations. Nothing triggered inspection flags. Inside, beneath layers of alternator housings and transmission components, sat 423 kilograms of crystalline methamphetamine. Street value approximated $340 million. The shipment represented 18 months of production from clandestine labs operating across Southeast Asia. It was packed with precision, vacuum-sealed into flat panels designed to evade X-ray detection, layered between legitimate cargo in patterns that mimicked standard freight density. The drugs were already scheduled for distribution. A network of independent trucking contractors had been briefed on pickup locations, delivery routes, and payment protocols. The methamphetamine would move from the Riverside staging warehouse to 12 states within 72 hours. Phoenix, Las Vegas, Portland, Seattle, Denver, Salt Lake City, Dallas, Houston, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, St. Arl, Lewis, and Chicago. Each location had cells ready to receive shipments and push product into street-level markets. DEA agents had been monitoring the container for 9 weeks. The investigation began with surveillance on a Los Angeles-based logistics coordinator who had been flagged for suspicious financial activity. Wire transfers to companies in Southeast Asia did not match declared business operations. Phone intercepts revealed coded conversations about delivery schedules and inventory management. Patterns suggested narcotics trafficking, but confirmation required deeper investigation. Federal agents coordinated with international partners in Thailand, Malaysia, and China. Shipping manifests were analyzed. Port records were cross-referenced. The container in question had originated from a manufacturing facility with documented ties to criminal organizations operating in the Golden Triangle region. Previous shipments from the same facility had been linked to methamphetamine seizures in Australia and New Zealand. The human cost was already visible. Methamphetamine addiction rates had climbed 14% across the 12 target cities over the previous 18 months. Emergency room visits for methamphetamine-related psychosis, cardiac events, and overdoses had increased proportionally. Public health systems were strained. Treatment facilities were operating beyond capacity. The drugs already in circulation were destroying lives. The incoming shipment would amplify the crisis. In Phoenix, a 41-year-old nurse lost her license after being caught diverting hospital medications to fund her methamphetamine addiction. She had been clean for 7 years after completing rehab in her 20s. Relapse occurred after she used methamphetamine at a party, believing it was a one-time decision. Within 3 months, she was using daily. Within 6 months, she had lost her job, her apartment, and custody of her 2 children. Her family did not know where she was. A construction supervisor in Portland missed 4 consecutive days of work without calling. When his employer sent someone to check on him, they found him in his apartment, paranoid and delusional after a week-long methamphetamine binge. He believed surveillance teams were watching him through his walls. He had covered every window with aluminum foil and had not slept in 6 days. Paramedics transported him to a psychiatric facility. His employer terminated his employment. He had worked for the company for 11 years. Denver police responded to a domestic violence call at a suburban home. A woman reported that her husband had become erratic and aggressive. When officers arrived, the husband was exhibiting signs of methamphetamine-induced psychosis. He attacked the officers, requiring 4 people to restrain him. The couple had 3 children, ages 4, 7, and 9. All 3 witnessed the incident. Child Protective Services removed the children pending investigation. Toxicology tests confirmed methamphetamine use. The man had no prior history of violence or substance abuse. He told investigators he had been using methamphetamine for 8 months to cope with work stress and financial pressure. Las Vegas emergency rooms treated 63 methamphetamine-related cases in a single month. Presentations included cardiac arrhythmias, strokes, severe dental decay, skin infections from compulsive picking, malnutrition, and acute psychotic episodes. Hospital staff described the patient population as younger than previous years. 22 of the 63 cases involved individuals under 25 years old. 5 were teenagers. The methamphetamine circulating in these markets was not uniform. Chemical analysis showed variations in purity, cutting agents, and contamination. Some batches contained toxic additives. Others were nearly pure. Users had no way to assess potency or safety. Each use carried risks that extended beyond addiction to immediate physical harm. But the shipment now sitting in Long Beach represented a scale that would overwhelm existing conditions. 423 kilograms would flood 12 major metropolitan markets simultaneously. Supply would exceed demand. Prices would drop. Purity would increase. Access would expand. New users would be drawn in by availability and affordability. Existing users would consume more because supply constraints would disappear. DEA analysts modeled the projected impact. Based on typical distribution patterns and consumption rates, the shipment would reach approximately 85,000 individual users within 30 days of release. That figure accounted for dilution, repackaging, and tiered distribution through multiple levels of dealers. 85,000 people would be directly exposed to methamphetamine from this single shipment. The health consequences would cascade. Emergency room visits would spike. Psychiatric facilities would exceed capacity. Law enforcement would see increases in property crimes, domestic violence, and public disturbance calls. Child Protective Services would manage more cases of parental neglect and endangerment. Employers would deal with absenteeism, workplace accidents, and productivity losses. Long-term effects would persist for years. Methamphetamine addiction causes structural brain changes that impair decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. Treatment requires months or years. Relapse rates are high. Recovery is difficult. Each person who develops addiction from this shipment represents decades of potential harm to themselves, their families, and their communities. The economic burden would extend into hundreds of millions of dollars. Healthcare costs for treating methamphetamine addiction and related medical complications. Criminal justice expenses for arrests, prosecutions, and incarceration. Lost productivity from individuals unable to work. Child welfare costs for children removed from homes. The $340 million street value of the drugs was only one measure of cost. The societal impact would be far greater. DEA coordination intensified as the container approached the port. Surveillance teams monitored the logistics coordinator in Los Angeles. Financial tracking identified payments to the trucking contractors scheduled to move the drugs. Phone intercepts revealed communication between coordinators in 12 different states. The network was larger than initial intelligence suggested. Federal agents worked with Customs and Border Protection to track the container through port processing. The goal was to allow the shipment to reach the Riverside warehouse while maintaining surveillance. Interdicting at the port would alert the network and cause them to scatter. Waiting until the drugs reached the staging location would enable a coordinated takedown that dismantled the entire distribution infrastructure. The container was offloaded from the cargo ship on Wednesday morning. Port scanners had been configured to alert on the specific container number, but the scan would appear routine to anyone monitoring port operations. The container was loaded onto a chassis and pulled by a truck registered to a legitimate freight company. The driver had no criminal history. He believed he was hauling automotive parts. The truck departed the port and drove east on Interstate 10 toward Riverside. DEA surveillance vehicles maintained visual contact. Aircraft provided overhead tracking. The route was monitored at every point. If the driver deviated from the expected path, agents were prepared to intervene. The warehouse in Riverside was located in an industrial park with dozens of similar facilities. The building was leased under a corporate entity that appeared legitimate on paper. Business licenses were current, utilities were paid, property taxes were up to date. Nothing distinguished it from surrounding warehouses that stored furniture, electronics, and consumer goods. DEA had conducted surveillance on the warehouse for 3 weeks. Personnel entering and exiting the facility had been photographed and identified. Vehicle traffic had been logged. Delivery schedules had been documented. The facility operated during normal business hours with what appeared to be standard warehouse activity. The sophistication was notable. The operation had been designed to avoid detection. The truck arrived at the warehouse Thursday afternoon, 26 hours after clearing customs. Gates opened. The truck entered. The container was positioned near a loading dock. Personnel began offloading cargo. From external surveillance, the activity appeared routine. Inside, the methamphetamine was being extracted from beneath the automotive parts and staged for distribution. DEA tactical planning was finalized. The operation required simultaneous execution of search warrants at 14 locations across 12 states. The Riverside Warehouse, coordinator residences in Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Portland, trucking company offices in Denver and Dallas, stash houses in Seattle, Salt Lake City, Houston, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, St. Louis, and Chicago. Timing was critical. If one location was raided prematurely, the network would be alerted and evidence would be destroyed. Legal preparations were extensive. Federal prosecutors in each jurisdiction prepared warrant applications. Affidavits detailed surveillance findings, financial evidence, and phone intercept data. Magistrate judges in 12 different federal districts reviewed applications and signed warrants. All warrants needed to be ready simultaneously. Tactical teams in each city conducted final briefings. Building layouts were reviewed. Suspect photos were distributed. Communication protocols were established. Medical support was positioned. Backup units were placed on standby. The operation required coordination across time zones, between federal and local agencies, and among teams that had never worked together before. The timeline was collapsing. Intelligence intercepts indicated that trucking contractors were scheduled to pick up their loads from the Riverside warehouse on Friday morning. The drugs would be moving by noon. Once distributed across interstate highways, the ability to intercept all shipments would be compromised. The window for comprehensive disruption was Friday morning before pickups began. On Friday at 6:14 a.m., simultaneous raids launched across 12 states. DEA tactical teams breached the Riverside warehouse and secured 423 kilograms of crystalline methamphetamine, packaging materials, distribution ledgers, and financial records. 11 individuals were detained on site. The automotive parts that served as cover cargo were legitimate, purchased specifically to create a convincing front. In Los Angeles, agents arrested the logistics coordinator at his residence. Evidence seized included encrypted phones, laptop computers with distribution databases, financial documents showing wire transfers totaling $18 million, and handwritten notes detailing pickup schedules and delivery routes. The coordinator had been operating for at least 3 years, managing multiple shipments through the same port infrastructure. Phoenix raids targeted 2 stash houses and a trucking depot. Agents recovered an additional 42 kilograms of methamphetamine that had arrived from a previous shipment, along with cash totaling $670,000, firearms, and customer lists. 7 arrests were made. Surveillance footage from the trucking depot showed multiple prior deliveries from Riverside. Portland operations netted 5 arrests and the seizure of distribution records documenting sales across Oregon and Washington. The records included customer codes, delivery zones, and pricing structures. The network had been supplying smaller dealers who operated in nightlife districts, college campuses, and working-class neighborhoods. Denver, Salt Lake City, and Seattle raids disrupted regional distribution hubs. Combined seizures totaled 68 kilograms of methamphetamine from prior shipments, 9 firearms, and cash exceeding $1 million. 16 individuals were arrested across these 3 cities. Evidence showed the network had been operating for more than 2 years, with regular shipments arriving every 6 to 8 weeks. Dallas and Houston operations targeted trucking logistics. Agents arrested 4 individuals involved in coordinating transport routes and managing driver schedules. Evidence included GPS tracking data, fuel card records, and communication logs detailing dozens of prior runs. The trucking network had been used to move narcotics, but also to transport legitimate freight, creating a cover that made detection difficult. Oklahoma City, Kansas City, St. Louis, and Chicago raids focused on street-level distribution cells. Combined arrests totaled 19 individuals. Seizures included smaller quantities of methamphetamine, distribution supplies, and customer contact information. These cells represented the final link in the distribution chain, the point where drugs reached individual users. The coordinated takedown dismantled the entire network within an 8-hour window. 423 kilograms of methamphetamine was removed from circulation before reaching consumers. Regional hubs containing an additional 110 kilograms from prior shipments were also seized. Total combined seizure, 533 kilograms. 57 arrests across 12 states. Financial evidence documenting operations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The immediate impact on methamphetamine markets was observable. In Phoenix, street-level prices increased by 38% within 1 week of the takedown. Dealers reported supply shortages. Users complained about reduced availability. The disruption was significant enough that public health officials documented a temporary decline in methamphetamine-related emergency room visits. Portland saw similar patterns. Treatment centers reported that some clients successfully maintained sobriety during the supply disruption because access became more difficult. The temporary barrier provided space for intervention. Some individuals entered treatment programs. Others reconnected with families. The window was brief, but for some people it made a difference. Denver Emergency Medical Services noted a reduction in calls related to methamphetamine-induced psychosis. The correlation was clear. When supply decreased, acute incidents declined. Hospital psychiatric units that had been operating at 112% capacity experienced slight reductions in methamphetamine-related admissions. But the broader crisis continued. Other networks remained operational. Different supply chains filled gaps created by the takedown. Demand persisted. Within weeks, methamphetamine availability began returning to previous levels as alternative sources expanded operations. The disruption was real, but not permanent. The shipment that was intercepted would have directly impacted 85,000 users within 30 days. Based on historical data and health models, DEA analysts estimated that the methamphetamine would have contributed to approximately 170 deaths from overdoses, cardiac events, and accidents during the first 90 days of circulation. An additional 400 people would have required hospitalization for serious medical complications. Thousands more would have developed addiction or experienced deterioration of existing addiction. Those outcomes did not occur. The drugs never reached circulation. The distribution network was dismantled. The logistics infrastructure was disrupted. 57 individuals who facilitated trafficking are now facing federal charges that carry mandatory minimum sentences measured in decades. The human stories that did not happen are invisible. The young professional who would have tried methamphetamine at a party and spiraled into addiction never encountered the drug. The father who would have relapsed after years of sobriety continued his recovery. The college student who would have overdosed completed the semester. The construction worker who would have lost his job to addiction kept working. These absent tragedies leave no evidence. There are no obituaries for deaths that did not occur, no hospital records for admissions that never happened, no child welfare cases for families that remained intact. The mathematics of prevention exist only in projections and estimates, but the container that cleared customs at Long Beach on Tuesday afternoon was real. The 423 kilograms of methamphetamine were real. The distribution network spanning 12 states was real. The 85,000 people who would have been exposed were real. The harm was scheduled, coordinated, and in motion. Friday morning, before the drugs could move into trucks bound for 12 cities, the operation collapsed. 57 arrests, 533 kilograms seized, 18 months of production removed from circulation. One major distribution network dismantled. The crisis continues. Other shipments are in transit. Different networks are operating. New supply lines are being established. The demand that drives methamphetamine markets has not diminished. Public health infrastructure remains strained. Treatment capacity is still insufficient. The systemic issues persist. But this container, this shipment, this network, these 85,000 potential exposures, this $340 million operation was stopped. The timing was measured in hours. Friday morning, before the trucks left the warehouse, before the drugs dispersed across interstates, before distribution cells received their inventory, before street-level dealers made their sales, before users consumed doses that would alter or end their lives. The work continues. Investigations are ongoing. Surveillance operations are active. Coordination between agencies persists. The next shipment is being planned. The next network is adapting. The threat remains constant. But this time, for this shipment, for these 12 cities, for these 85,000 people, the drugs never arrived. Distribution never happened. The harm never occurred. The margin was ours. That made all the difference.